Alright, so today we're going to replace the front wheel hub bearing assembly here on this 2012 Nissan Altima. We're going to replace the front wheel bearing assembly and change the front brake pads while we're at it, since we're going to have all of this stuff off. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to remove the brake caliper. So you got a couple of 14 mil. There's another one down here, 9/16 14 mil bolts. They got to come out. That one and that one, and we'll take the caliper off. Then there's two 22 mil bolts here, one down lower. Those got to come off, so that we'll take the entire brake caliper bracket off. And we'll go ahead and do that. So caliper's off, and I just hung it with a zip tie up there because you don't want it to dangle by the hose. It's not good for it. Broke these two bolts loose, 22 mil. They're in there pretty good, so you might need like a breaker bar, and I used that. But I was able to break those two loose so that we can take the caliper bracket off. In the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and pull these brake pads out. I mean, they're not super bad, but I think the other side's worse than this. Like, the passenger side of the car, I think, is worse. So, those out. Still not bad. It's kind of. Oh. So we're going to take those out. We're going to take these brake pad brackets, all that stuff off, but we'll get to that after we do the hub. So we'll go ahead and take the caliper bracket off, and then we're going to have to take this Cotter pin off and the axle nut off, so we can get the rotor off. So I'll go ahead and get this off here. So the rotor's off, axle nut's off. That took a little convincing. It's around 120 foot-pounds when it's torqued on, so you're gonna need a cheater bar or something to get that loose, and then a way to hold that. What I ended up doing was I used the ladyfoot, whatever, alignment punch, but it's got that ladyfoot on the end of it there to hold it against the it's this little collar right here, and on the lug nut itself, right? So then you can turn against it here. I ended up using the cheater bar to finally break that thing loose, but got it out, or got it loose, got the nut off of it, boom. So now loosening the 4 bolts here, 2, 3, and 4. Of course, this is the back side of them. The bolt head is back in here, but I have to loosen all 4 of those to be able to get the hub off. And I can try to get in there and see if I can get you a look at. There they are. This is the bottom 2, there and there, and the top 2, there and there, and they're 17 mil. I want to say they're torqued to around 65 foot-pounds, but I will definitely make sure of that before I'm done, and put it in the description with the torque specs that I use on all of this stuff. But once those 4 bolts are out, should be able to take the hub and bearing assembly off of the car, and then it'll be time to put on the new one. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this off. All right, the hub is off. This is the brake brake shield, brake dust shield, whatever. Here's the old hub, and it is off. It's just getting old. It's got over 100,000 miles on it. This is the first time these hubs have ever been pulled off and changed. Usually they recommend about every 100,000 you change out these front wheel bearings, wheel hubs in the in a front wheel drive vehicle, just because they get a lot of stress on them. And the bearings are actually here inside here, and then one on the front side there. But you really, unless you got a press and a way to take all of this apart, you're not just going to replace the bearing, you're going to replace the entire wheel hub assembly, which is this. So yeah, so they vary in price. If I can find the one I bought. I bought this one. This is one of the more expensive ones, but it's all new parts. All right, so a lot of the ones you'll get that are cheaper than this will be remanufactured or refurbished. So not that that's a bad thing, because most of the body and of the hub and everything is reusable. A lot of this stuff is reusable, because I mean, you can see it's just rusty, it's not in bad shape. What the problem is in here. And so what they do with the refurbished or the rebuilds is they press this whole thing apart, they pull out the hub or the bearings, they change the bearings out, they re-grease them, and generally keep this same spline in here, because this thing doesn't really get that messed up either. But they may replace that as well. But if you buy a new one, you're getting all new guts, new hardware, new outside, new inside, everything's brand new. So you know, it's, I don't know, some people like remanufactured parts, some people don't. I don't particularly care for remanufactured parts. I prefer to buy the whole thing new. But if you don't have the money to do that, because this one was, I want to say this was $160 a piece. So you know, that's just 320 bucks just to do the two front hubs on this car. But if you don't want to spend that kind of money, you can get these remanufactured. You can get them on eBay and stuff like that. AutoZone, I think, sells a reman that's like $45 a piece, and they're pretty decent. They're, you know, they're gonna do the job. You may not get 100,000 miles out of them, but you're gonna get 50 or 60,000 out of them. These you should get 100,000 out of without any problem. But I'm gonna go ahead and put this one on the car, and we'll start torquing everything down and get this side put back together so we can do the brakes. Alright, the new hub's in. I went ahead and put the axle nut back on. I haven't torqued it down yet. I'm getting ready to torque it down. But these 4 bolts, the 4 you took out of the back side of the old hub assembly, put 4 new, or put those back in. You have to make sure that your brake shield, the brake dust shield is going to come off with it. So just make sure when you put it back on that you line those holes back up, or you don't forget to put it back. I mean, if you don't put it back on, no big deal. You're just going to get a lot more brake dust all over all over these parts back here, and probably not good for it. I don't know. But anyway, 65 foot-pounds on these 4 bolts, 17 mil bolts, 65 foot-pounds of torque. The uppers and lowers. And what I did is, because you have to pull the whole hub, has to be pulled back into the knuckle back here, so it's not going to be set all the way in there when you push it in. So what you want to do is get it back there as far as you can, get a bolt in here, start this bolt, then tighten this bottom one, then come up here and here, and just tighten them a little bit at a time so you pull the whole hub into the knuckle assembly evenly. You don't want it to be, you know, kicked one way or the other, because it's going to make it difficult to get the rest of the bolts in. So don't put one bolt in and tighten it all the way down and then expect to be able to get the rest of the 3 in. Ain't going to happen. Put one in, get it started, start the next one, start the next one, start that one, and then go around in that same kind of like an X pattern right there tightening them up just a little bit at a time until you pull it all the way in. Once you get them good and tight, real tight, and you feel like it's not pulling it in anymore, then you can go ahead and start with your torquing procedures. But the same thing with your torquing procedures, you go 1, 2, 3, 4. Just make sure you're going across to evenly torque it down. So now I'm going to torque this nut here on the axle, and then we'll get started on the brakes, because that'll be the next thing. Once you change out the brake pads, you get that ready, and then slap the caliper back on, and we'll torque down these bolts here and the banjo bolts in the back. So any of you who watch my videos, y'all know that I try to make this stuff as easy as possible and give y'all little tips on how to maybe make this a little bit easier on yourself, or show you things that maybe some of these other guys that do these videos don't show you, like I'm about to show you now. The back side of the hub, the new hub, right? You're gonna notice you're gonna have these notches out of the hub, right? They look unassuming, right? You think? Those are for your ABS sensor, which is right there, which mine has been broken off, has been for a while because of some issues I had before, but we'll be replacing that. So what you can do is you can take this little 10 mil bolt out, because this sensor still works even though the freaking tip of it's broke off. It still works. There you go. You can pull this out, right? Because in a normal hub, it's going to stick out probably, you know, a good ½ inch. It's going to be sticking out so that it can go inside of this hole right here and count the number of, I don't know, like teeth or something in there. I don't know. It counts whatever and matches it up with the other 3 wheels to see if they're all spinning at the same speed. So your traction control kind of anti-lock braking system and stuff works. Is just making sure that they're all spinning at the same time. So these little sensors have to come in here and they have to count how fast this wheel's going, how fast this hub is turning. And so it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna be sticking out there. This one's not really sticking out because the tip of it got broken off. It was rattling around in the hub, but it's gonna be sticking out a little bit. So when you go to put this hub in, you have to be sure that it goes in one of these holes. Like, you can put this thing in completely upside down. You put it in like this, you got one of these notches looking straight up at you like that, it's upside down. So you need to turn this thing over so that you got a notch on the side and the side, so that when it goes in, that notch right there, let's see if I can get it, that notch right there is gonna match up with where your ABS sensor is hanging out right there. If you don't match those up and your ABS sensor is hanging out and you go to jam that thing on there, you're gonna break the end of your ABS sensor off like I did. I don't know how I did it. I didn't do it that way. It was like that. Trust me. But yeah. So make sure that when you put the hub back in, you've got notch and a notch facing up. You don't have that notch facing straight up. If that notch is facing straight up, you need to spin the whole thing over 180 degrees and put it in just like that, because these bolt holes are going to line up with those bolt holes, or those bolt holes are going to line up with those bolt holes. Kind of weird. You think they would offset those so that you couldn't fuck that up and put it in wrong, but they didn't. So make sure you got a notch and a notch up top like that to correspond with where your ABS sensor goes in. I think the ABS sensor on the other side is still good, so when I pull that one off, I'll show you what I'm talking about. This one's kind of a bad example because it's busted, but whatever. Anyway, that's my little tip for you today. All right, another little helpful little thing, little trick. If you get the car up high enough, so when you're torquing this axle nut, because that thing needs it's between 120 and 129 foot-pounds of torque. It's a lot of torque to try to put on the bar and keep the damn hub from spinning at the same time, right? Not a lot of people got that kind of arm strength, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Anyway, what I did is, if the car's up high enough and you can slide the tire all the way up underneath the car like that, you can take a flathead screwdriver, shove that thing up in there in one of the vent holes of your rotor, kind of like that, and let it come down and push against the tire. So now you have enough, because I got 120 pounds set on it right now, and there it goes, you know. So that's just one way you can keep that from turning when you're trying to torque down the axle. And that same thing for taking it off is just on the other side. You can put the screwdriver on the other side, slide the tire back a little bit, and then, you know, you're picking up with the instead of pushing down on this end, you'd be pulling up to turn it left, you know, of course, to unscrew the other one on the other side. But yeah, just a little trick for you. Okay, so this is the other side hub, and I'm going to show you what I was talking about with the ABS sensor. That's it right there. See how far that bad boy sticks out? So you go to try to put the new hub assembly in there, and you're not lining up with one of these holes in it. Like, this is the one that came off of the car, so it already had this crap in there. I don't even plug that for some reason, I don't know. But the ABS sensor goes down inside of there, and it almost rides right up against this outside of this bearing here. So make sure that when you put their, because like this one would go, like the notch went right in there, so it went right inside of the ABS sensor, went right inside that hole right there, right? So make sure when you put the hub back on that you don't try to put it on upside down like that, because as soon as you push it in there, you probably push it in there, but you'll break the end of your ABS sensor off like I did on the other side. So then you have to get a new ABS sensor, which I think eBay, you can get these for like 30 bucks, I think, for the pair on the front of the car. I may be mistaken on that price, but I know you can get them on eBay. The front wheel ABS sensors, or you can go to a junkyard and pull them off of a beater in the junkyard, and they work just as good. Other thing too about taking this bad boy off, right? So it's in there pretty good. I mean, like, you can see, like, around this edge right here where my thumb is, that is wedged into the knuckle pretty damn tight. So once you get the 4 bolts out, it's not like it's just gonna pop right out. So put this, kind of wrestle it back in there right quick. Oh, god damn. It's hard to do with one freaking hand. Anyway, once you get the 4 bolts out, and that's the problem, before you start beating on it to try to get it out or prying or anything like that, make sure that you can push your so it's like, there we go, it's like half-ass in there, but make sure that you can move your axle once you've got the nut off of it, that you can actually push that in like that, because that's going to stop you from really being able to, I mean, you'll be able to get it off, but it's going to pull the drive shaft. And on this side, it's not a big problem because you got a that hanger back there, right there, that prevents you from being able to pull the axle out of the transmission way back there. Ain't nothing like that on the driver's side. So you go pulling on this thing and you haven't loosened, this isn't loose and moving freely, and you yank the hub, you're going to yank the drive shaft right out of the, or the CV shaft, whatever, right out of the freaking transmission, and it's going to start dumping transmission fluid all over the ground. So just to make sure that you can move that back and forth. If it's stuck, it doesn't feel like it wants to move, you can put the nut back on it and tighten it all the way down till it's almost flush, and tap it with like a ball peen hammer a few times, and that should loosen it up. Then you can reach around in the back here, grab a hold of this part right here, and wiggle it back and forth while you gently tap here with your hammer. And I mean gently, because you scar up the edges of these threads right here, and you won't get the bolt back on. You're pretty much wasted your entire CV axle if you mess up those threads and can't get the bolt back on. So yeah, you can grab back here, right here where my hand is, and kind of wiggle up and down a little bit, and back, up, down, and back, while you tap here lightly with the ball peen hammer, and then you should feel it just slide right out, because there's a good bit of play in it, so you should feel it slide back in there a little ways, and then you can start to get the hub assembly off. So you can tap on the back of it with a hammer, and I say tap, but you're probably going to end up beating on it by that point, because that thing is in there. Once you get a little bit of a lip in there, and of course your brake shield is going to be on here too, you get a screwdriver back in there like this pry bar behind it, and start prying it prying it, and eventually it's just gonna pop right out. But yeah. All right, now we can move on to the brakes. So here's the brake pads. Something or another. Those are the ones we're gonna use. You know, that comes with a little bit of grease, and it comes with new guides, brackets for your brake pads. So I haven't taken those off yet. I wanted to wait till we get to this point so that when I take this one off, I know it looks exactly like this one, so I'm putting the same shit back on, same spot, right? When you do put them on, these guides right here, where that'll be right here, where the brake pad itself is going to sit in there like that, and it's going to move back and forth along that guide. That's what your grease is for. So once you put the new guide in, just dab a little bit of grease there, or you can dab it on the end of your brake pad there, where it's going to go like that end right there, where it's going to go into that. Like that. That way you got a little grease in there. It helps it move back and forth a little bit easier, and avoids, you know, squeaking and stuff like that. Just make sure you don't get the grease on the rotor. My rusty rotors. But yeah, I'm gonna take those off, replace them with those, with a little bit of grease on them, put the new brake pads on them. We'll put the caliper bracket back on the car. We'll compress the piston there, slide that back on top of there, bolt everything back together, and that'll be done. That's a hub and brake assembly. All right, front brakes are on. I put the caliper bracket back on. These two 22 mil bolts, one here, one below. Can't really get it in there. Yeah, that one down there. Okay. That one, 98 foot-pounds of torque. Yeah, it's fun trying to get a torque wrench in there. Ain't much room. But 98 foot-pounds on those two, and then right around 20 on these. As you can see, these spin, so you're going to want to hold this end while you tighten that end. But still needs to be able to move freely back and forth. So we put the new pads on, we put a little bit of grease in there, and put the caliper and everything back on. Rotor's still kind of floppy because it hasn't set yet, because we took it off, of course, to replace the hub. But that's basically it. Torque this down to 120, put a new Cotter pin in there. I don't ever reuse Cotter pins. It's just dumb to reuse them. They're cheap and you can always get more. So new Cotter pin, and make sure my brake bracket kind of got a little bent there from I had that thing hung up there. But just making sure everything's out of the way, everything looks good, and we'll put the tire back on it, and that'll be it for hub and brake pads on a 2012 Nissan Altima. Put the torque specs and tools needed in the description, and that's pretty much it. I did the back brakes too, but basically if you do the front brakes, the back brakes are a piece of cake. Just kind of make sure when you take it off, you match everything up, you know, make sure everything looks the same. You pull those little brake pad guides off in the back, make sure you use it, because some of them are narrow or some of them are wider depending on the rotor you got back there. Just make sure you match them up with the ones that were already on the car, and always make sure that you're because I've seen it done. This side does not go against the drum or against the disc. That side goes against the disc. This is your brake pad side. This is the side that the piston will push against. So make sure that is always facing against the disc. Just like that. So when you're done, you should look like that. You should be able to see that. That way you know they put it on the right way, because I've seen people do it the wrong way. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.